Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Life of a Business Manager podcast. This is the podcast where we break down the real world skills that every business manager needs to succeed. I'm your host, Sina Chan, and today we're talking about something that every business manager will face at some point in their career. We're talking about mistakes, and we're not talking about the small, harmless ones. We're actually talking about the expensive mistakes. Because in business management, small decisions carry big consequences in the future. For example, you could have a missed email that turns into a delayed product launch. You could have poor communication that turns into employee turnover, or a lack of follow up, which turns into operational chaos. An ignored problem today will become a full blown crisis 6 months from now. So, today we're breaking down the most common costly mistakes that business managers make, why they happen, how to spot them early, and how to lead with being more proactive before the small decisions turn into big, major problems. This episode isn't about being a perfect business manager, it's actually just about being aware. Because the strongest business managers aren't the ones who never make mistakes. We all make mistakes, we're not perfect. They're the ones who learn how to recognize the mistakes before it turns into a problem. So let's get into it. Okay, everyone, let's start with segment one, which is do not ignore the small problems because they will become bigger problems in the future. One of the biggest mistakes business managers make is ignoring small problems before they seem manageable at the time. And this happens all the time. Just because it doesn't feel urgent right now, it doesn't mean it's not a problem. For example, you could deal with something like a workflow that feels slightly inefficient. You could have communication that starts getting a little inconsistent, or you could have a team member that begins to pull back, or your deadline starts slipping just a little bit. You can also deal with morale that feels a little off, but nothing you could really pinpoint. So these are all small problems, but they can turn into something bigger in the future. And lastly is accountability that gets inconsistent, but nobody says anything yet. And because none of these small problems feels critical at the moment, you just wait in order to fix the problem until one day that small issue has quietly grown into a major operational problem. Here's what strong business managers understand is most crises don't appear out of nowhere. They send you warning signs early. We just don't act on them because the pain isn't severe enough yet. But leadership isn't about reacting when things break down. Leadership is about recognizing patterns before they actually become a problem. For example, if your team keeps raising the same concern, you might want to pay attention to that. Or if communication keeps breaking down between departments one by one, again, pay attention. Or if turnover starts creeping up and you start to see employees leave one by one in your department, that is an issue. Because the small problems you ignore today have a way of becoming the most expensive problems that you have to deal with in the future. Okay, everyone, let's go into segment two. So let's just talk about one of the most damaging and most avoidable mistakes in business management, and that is poor communication. And I'm not just talking about lack of communication, I'm actually talking about unclear communication. Because sometimes the message that is being sent is just not landing the way you need it to be. This is where projects can fall apart. This is where departments can get frustrated. And this is where employees quietly start losing trust in leadership. Here's a mistake a lot of business managers make. They assume their team understands expectations simply because they mention it once. But clarity doesn't work that way. Clarity requires repetition. It requires follow up. It requires making sure the message that you communicated was actually received and understood. Your team needs to know what's expected of them, what's changed, what the priorities are, what are the deadlines, and what success actually looks like in your department. Without the Without that clarity, people start filling in the gaps with assumptions, and assumptions always leads to mistakes. One unclear email can delay an entire project. One missing conversation can create conflict between two departments, and one misunderstood expectation can quietly damage the morale in your department. Communication is not just a soft skill in business management, it's an operational skill. And honestly, many of the most avoidable workplace problems trace back to poor communication that either never happened or weren't communicated clearly to begin with. So just keep that in mind. If you are communicating, communicate clearly. Make sure everything is understood before you move on to your next step. Okay, everyone, let's go into segment 3, which is trying to do everything alone as a business manager. Now, this next mistake is one I see constantly among high performing business managers. And it's one of the hardest habits to break. And honestly, I'm also guilty of this mistake. I have a problem trusting people to do the work, but I'm working on it. And sometimes it's difficult when you know that you can do the work and have the time. But I've learned to delegate, and it has saved me so much time and increased my productivity. So, trying to do everything yourself might sound great in your head. And in the short term, it feels productive that you're getting things done and you're staying on top of everything. But over time, that mindset creates burnout, bottlenecks, decision fatigue, and an operation that can't function without you standing in the middle of it. So here's the shift that separates good managers from bad managers. Your value is not in doing everything personally. Your value is in building the systems, the people, and the processes that function effectively without needing you involved in every single detail. Because when everything depends on one person, you as a business manager, the entire operation becomes unbearable. Strong business managers delegate with intention, they invest time in developing their people, they create accountability structures, and they build operational support around themselves so then the team can move forward with or without them in the room. And that's not losing control, that's actually sustainability for your department. Okay, everyone, let's get into segment 4, which is avoiding difficult conversations. Let's be honest about something. One of the easiest things to put off in management is the difficult conversation. Whether it's addressing the poor performance, the team conflict, the attitude issues, or toxic behavior, those conversations feel very uncomfortable. So a lot of business managers will delay them and they hope that the issue works itself out. They assume the employee will pick up the hints. They tell themselves that they will address it later, but later rarely comes. And unresolved issues almost never disappear on their own, they actually grow. So here's the difficult truth. Every time business managers avoid a hard conversation, the rest of the team is watching. Employees notice who gets accountable and who doesn't. They also notice what behavior gets tolerated within the team. They notice whether the standards that leadership talks about are actually being enforced, and that inconsistency, it quietly changes your culture from the inside out. So strong business managers understand that a direct, professional, handled conversation, even an uncomfortable one, is always healthier than letting the silent resentment within your team build across the department. So avoiding discomfort in the short term always creates bigger consequences down the road for you. I always say have the difficult conversations while it's in front of you, because if you wait for them, they actually becomes more of a challenge to handle that difficult conversation. Okay, everyone, let's get into segment 5, which is operating reactively instead of proactively. So here's another costly mistake that quietly holds business managers back, and that is constantly operating in the reactive mode. Always putting out fires, always responding to the latest emergency, always fixing problems at the last minute. Now, some industries move faster by nature, and that's understandable. That's expected. For example, healthcare, logistics, customer service, high growth organization, startups. So, urgency is part of that environment, and that's expected. But when every single day feels chaotic, when there's never a moment to breathe or plan ahead, that's just not a busy season. That's a signal of a deeper operational problem. So, reactive business managers create exhaustion while proactive business managers create stability. And the difference comes down to the questions that you're asking yourself as a business manager. So, proactive business managers aren't just asking what's on fire today, they're asking what risks are growing that I haven't addressed yet, what bottlenecks keep showing up, what processes are outdated or wasting time? What are the communication gaps? What problems can I see coming before they actually arrive? Because the goal of a strong business manager isn't just surviving your day to day operation. The goal is to improve them so you prevent problems in the future. Okay, everyone, let's get into segment 6, which is not documenting enough. This next mistake might sound very simple to anyone listening out there, but the consequences are anything but simple. Poor documentation is one of the costly mistakes that business managers can make. And I want to be direct about this because documentation is one of the most underrated tool in business management because memory is unreliable. Verbal conversations will get forgotten, processes evolve, employees will leave, leadership changes, and when none of it is written down, critical operational knowledge walks out the door with them. And without proper documentation, accountability becomes harder for you to enforce. Training becomes inconsistent, communication gets distorted, and the same confusion keeps repeating itself because nobody can reference what was actually agreed upon. For example, strong documentations can help you with managing a difficult employee, changing workflows, restructuring the department, and anything related to HR legal issues during the workplace. Strong business managers document their processes, their decisions, policies, meeting notes, expectations, and workflows. And not because we're all obsessed with paperwork here, but because documentation creates operational clarity, it protects the team, it protects the organization, and it protects you as a business manager in your role. And honestly, some of the biggest, most avoidable workplace dispute and miscommunication happen for one simple reason. It's because nobody wrote it down. So always make sure to document as much as you can, especially as a business manager. Okay, everyone, let's get into segment 7, which is something we can sometimes overlook, and that is ignoring employee burnout. So, this next mistake is becoming more and more common, I've noticed, in today's workplace environment. And it's one that can sneak up on you even if you're a great business manager. Ignoring burnout. And here's what makes it so dangerous. Burnout rarely announces itself. Your employees aren't going to walk into your office and say, I'm overwhelmed. It shows up differently. It shows up in lower motivation, more mistakes, shorter patience, and a team that's slowly disengaging themselves right in front of you. And sometimes business managers get so locked in on productivity and performance metrics that they stop noticing the condition of the people producing the work. But here's the reality. Burnout teams don't just underperform, they create turnover, declining morale, poor customer experience, and operational mistakes that compound over time. Yes, obviously, accountability matters, performance matters, results matter, but being a sustainable team and a great business manager requires awareness of the workload, the staffing pressure, and emotional fatigue that's building across your team. Because here's the bottom line, you can have the best processes and systems in place, but if your people are running on empty, your operation will eventually show it. Strong business managers never forget that people are not machines, although let's just be honest here, it's probably coming soon, but right now, people are not machines. So take care of your staff and do not ignore all the signs that are showing up for employee burnout. Okay, everyone, let's go into our last segment 8, which is why awareness can help business managers out there. Here's one of the most important lessons, and that is experience will teach business managers out there. And it's something I want you to really sit with as you're listening to this episode. Most operational disasters aren't caused by one massive mistake, they're caused by small, ignored problems quietly stacking on top of each other over time. That's why awareness is such a critical skill for business managers out there. Great business managers develop the ability to spot risk early before it becomes a crisis. They communicate with clarity and intention. They address issues directly instead of hoping they resolve themselves. They build strong systems, protect team morale, and they stay proactive rather than constantly reacting to whatever's in front of them. And here's something equally important. Every business manager makes mistakes. Every single one. There's no exception. The goal was never to be perfect. The goal is to grow as a business manager, have better awareness, sharper decision making, and the ability to recognize pattern before it becomes a problem. Because being an experienced business manager doesn't mean that you have all the answer. It comes from paying attention, staying humble, and willing to learn even when the lesson was harder than what you expected. So just stay aware as a business manager and make sure that you resolve any small ignored problems that you can handle right now before it starts piling up. Okay, everyone, here's some closing thoughts. So if you're listening to today's episode and quietly reflecting on mistakes you've made as a business manager, I want you to know something that's completely normal. Every business manager has been there. It's the most important thing isn't that you made mistakes. It's whether you're willing to recognize the patterns before they become permanent mistakes. Because the takeaway from today's episode is small problems don't stay small when they're ignored. Communication matters far more than most business managers realize accountability creates stability, documentation prevents confusion, and burnout affects performance. And proactive business manager prevents the kind of unnecessary chaos that drains your team and causes issues in operations. But awareness creates improvement, and improvement over time through consistent helps you become a great business manager and a strong leader. Again, thank you so much for tuning into Life of a Business Manager podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with another business manager out there who's experiencing the same type of problem. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you haven't already, follow the podcast, leave a review, and connect with the Life of a Business Manager community online. And if you have any questions about the role, suggestions for future topics, or stories of your own, I'd love to hear from you. You can find my email in the show notes below. As always, thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, bye everyone. Hi everyone. Just a reminder, the content provided in our podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with appropriate professionals before making any business decisions based on the information provided in this podcast. We do not endorse any products or services mentioned unless stated in any of our episodes. Thank you so much for listening.